I can hear, and we're back. We're back. We're back. We're back. We're back. Guys, I'm so excited. We've had a month of rest. Well, kind of rest, because you ladies have been out literally changing the world. So much life has happened in the last 4 weeks.
Yes, a lot has happened.
So much.
Aisha, you had a big, major accomplishment. Would you like to share?
I don't even know what.
You got an amazing award.
Oh, yes. Shout out to my organization. For some of you guys that might not know, I serve in the United States Air Force. I've been in the service since 2003. And the blessing of it is, with my leadership experience and really knowing that resiliency and leadership go hand in hand, I really got involved in resiliency and really helping with things like suicide prevention. Of course, veteran suicide, and also suicide of members that are very high. So I've been really pouring into leaders about resiliency. So I got highlighted for it. I got an award for it. So I'm so blessed and honored to be able to, this service has blessed me so much as a leader. So being able to give back to leadership and help them be resilient and overcome a lot of the, real life stuff that a lot of military members go through, I've been able to support that. So it's just a blessing to be able to give back, and I'm just thankful for an award like that.
Now, what's the name of the award?
Well, it's an on the spot award. It's something that my organization does every month. So what they do is they identify somebody within the organization that has done, a variety of things. So of course it varies. So it's just something that my organization noticed. I wasn't expecting it. And it's just been a blessing, because that, I've really been passionate about supporting leaders in just so many different ways. And like I said, with our military population, they do so much to serve our country, but a lot of them are suicidal. A lot of them are still going through real life things like sexual violence, interpersonal violence. So being able to, again, pour into that, it's just a blessing. And like I said, being highlighted for it, if anything, just lets me know that the work is, it's just happening, and it's actually helping people. So again, it's just an honor. Yeah.
It is an honor. You're so humble because you're like super high up. Can you tell everyone what branch?
I get
like it's killing her that I'm like putting her on the
yeah, she is. Well, again, I've served since 2003. I'm an E7, so I'm like a part of the third highest rank. So it's 9 ranks. Right now, I'm in the process of getting to the 8th rank. And again, the goal is to, if it's God willing, to get to become an E9, because again, the higher you go up, the more strategic and big picture impact you can make. So it's just, like I said, this is an honor. Yeah, you're putting me on the spot. So that's what I want to Kara. I'm sure Kara is doing some amazing things up there. Okay.
Is the third highest rank in the Air Force, okay?
Yes.
Do not try Aisha. Because she has hands and arms.
You're funny.
Yeah.
You got me over here sweating.
Kara, girl, you've had a lot of life happen. I don't want to put all of the great and some transitional things that are going on, but it's been 4 weeks. What have we missed with Kara?
Yeah, it's a lot of personal stuff going on right now. My daughter is 20. We moved her back to Chicago, and she's going to do online school, but she's a nursing major, so practicals are still going to happen in the hospital. So she's excited to be out of our house. She probably won't ever live at home again. So It's a bittersweet. She's launched and she's happy and confident, but she's gone. And my son is going away to school too. So right now, like, I'm trying to cover up all the packing and the boxes. So the good thing is my husband and I are empty nest. So we're moving out of a 3-bedroom house into a little apartment downtown.
Let's up in the sky. She's moving up.
So we've already got date nights planned. Like Natalie and her husband are going to come over, and we're getting all
how much effort I put into date night tonight. Okay. All right. Let's have a fun time on this podcast, okay?
That's right. So lots of personal transitions, and work continues to be a challenge and a blessing, and lots of creativity. So here we are.
Here we
I'm
are.
glad to be back with you guys.
Oh, so glad. We do miss Amber. Amber, are you out there? Please like, share, comment. We are, so if you caught the countdown, we played Try Jesus, Don't Try Me. And then we're talking about implicit bias. We're talking about diversity, inclusion, and equity. And the reason why we put Try Jesus, Don't Try Us is because all of us have had conversations about within our jobs, within the context where we are leading women, in a sense, we have all experienced microaggressions or had to make difficult decisions based on upholding our values for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we wanted to just have a conversation around that, as well as to help people with some strategies on how you can lead differently, right? What does transformational leadership really look like in a practical sense when you're serving someplace like the Air Force or in publishing or for racially diverse young adults in the context that I serve? So how do you work this out wherever it is that you're called to serve? And Kara, it really came out of a conversation that we were having about looking at even how people are hired or how you build your team and what are some of the policies that you put in place. You want to start us off and just talk a little bit about, you don't have to go into all the stuff and all the things, but what's been bubbling up for you?
Well, it's, first of all, I would say the organization I work for is in a really privileged position that we have enough reserves and enough stability right now that we get to be hiring people. And in the publishing industry in the United States right now, that is rare. But it's really I'm learning so much about, again, the blind spots and the policies and the procedures that exist within an 85-year-old organization that limits the pools where we even post our jobs. The HR policies that support white supremacy, that support white supremacist values. And so I'm just learning a lot more about that as I'm doing the work. So it's like learning as I go and running into barriers and trying to change things on the fly in an older organization that really wants to be more racially equitable, at least in pockets, right? And so what networks do I need? Who do I need to be talking to? And who will hold me accountable to the changes that I want to make? And then how can I, as a middle manager, how can I both manage up and down to try and make those changes? So that's a little bit.
That is so real. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I wasn't planning for us to talk about that, but I've been doing a lot of thinking and reading about middle management and how difficult that position is because of how traditional forms of leadership is so power centered and the silos that come, and how literally middle managers are exhausted, like across the board, period. And I know, Aisha, you've done a lot of, particularly when you talk about your leadership development that's focused on teams, a lot of research and strategy around middle management. So can you talk a little bit about, particularly during this time when we talk about diversity and inclusion, what does that mean as a middle manager when you're not necessarily the executive? How do you teeter between these two worlds and positions?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard. I mean, I won't say it's hard because I think, of course, just like Kara said, it depends on the organization you're at. You have those first tier leaders, right? They might be new to the organization and they're still trying to get their feet wet, so they might not want to ruffle feathers that much. You have mid-tier leaders that might be there. They've been there for a while and they're at a place where they've seen and they've experienced and they have more knowledge. But the question is, it just depends on how much influence the C-suite and the executives allow them to have for them to be able to share and say, listen, just like me within my organization, right? We see diversity, on this first and mid-tier, but there's something that changes and something that happens when you start getting to that executive and that C-suite level where we're not seeing that much diversity, right? So I think it just depends on how much leeway and how much support and how much that CEO, those executives are really allowing those mid-tier managers and even the first-tier managers to be able to say, listen, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I think will benefit the organization, because really that first and mid-tier, they're the really ones that are pushing that mission and that vision. And those are the people that you want to get information from. Those are the people that are affected by these unfortunate institutional issues. So those are the people you should be connecting with. And if you don't do that, you might be missing some key information. So it all depends on that CEO, right? Because it starts with the top. It all depends on the leaders that he or she bring in. And then based off of that relationship will determine if that mid-tier manager is allowed to really give that input. So if a mid-tier manager or leader is having issues with providing that information and they're working so hard, then my question is, are those executives, are those C-suite level leaders, are they really allowing them to give that input that they should be allowed to give to make that change in those shifts?
And then I think also there is a certain level of authority. It may not feel like autonomy as a mid-level manager in how you cultivate your team and the culture that you create. And what I'm finding for me, and shout out to Toby for Try Jesus, Don't Try Me, is that because I am so committed to leading in a particular way, I have zero tolerance for any form, like any form of microaggression or like trying to do a power play on me or trying to, or saying things that are culturally incompetent. Like the days of turning a blind eye for me personally are over. And I'm walking into a mindset shift that, we don't have to play the politics in that we allow people to get away with, insensitivity, implicit bias, prejudice in any form that it's found. And in some ways, my effectiveness as a leader, the way that I lead my team creates a counterculture to what we find in traditional leadership. And I think that's like the rub, right? That's the gag. Turn your eye because it's so normal, and let it go because I didn't know. But I'm like, I don't know if you guys feel like that, but gone are those days when we let I don't know pass. Go ahead, Kara.
Jen, I think no, go ahead, Kara.
Kara looked like
I was going to say, I was going to say, it's real. I just had a conversation this week with one of the executive leadership folks about racial equity, and he was sharing some articles with me, and he was saying there are some folks in our organization that if I share these articles, I fear the backlash I'm going to get. And he said, I know you often don't agree with me, but I don't feel like you're going to blame and shame me, that we can have a conversation. And so I feel like as a white person in the organization, trying not to be silent with other white people, it's like if I blame or shame, they just shut down. So like I hear you, Nathalie, like I can't let it go anymore. I can't be silent anymore. And I have to meet people where they are without blame and shame to be able to educate. And one of the things I want to talk about is to educate and activate. Like it has to be both. But so that was just with an conversation this week.
I think that's transformational leadership. That's transformational leadership is not calling you out and shaming you, but it's setting the precedence of who we are and what is acceptable in this particular culture that we're building. And so you're embracing the conversation, but you're not turning a blind eye. And I think that's what is so important right now. So when I say try Jesus, don't try me, I'm not saying, please do not go to your job and bust everybody over the head. We're just saying.
At least not every time.
Turning over tables. But cultivating an environment where this this is what transformational leadership looks like. You're going to say something, Aish.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I've also challenged. So I recently did a workshop with some business leaders, and it's like I'm challenging them to, we had our conversation about innovation. We need to also consider, do you want to be an organization of just the now? Like, do you want your company to be around forever and you can pass it on to your children's children? Well, I need you to understand that the generation that's coming, the Gen Zers and the generations coming after that, they are looking for diversity, even all the way into the type of commercials that you're putting out there, because we talked about marketing as well. They're looking at how you're handling these matters. They're following you on social media. They have sites like Glassdoor that answer those questions. Are they diverse? Are they inclusive? Are there opportunities available? But the future, the generation of the now is one thing, but if you want to be long lasting, you have to also consider, what is a generation of the future looking for? And that's what they're looking. They're looking for diversity, inclusion, and equity. And if you ain't doing it, they're leaving. And now it's turning into a retention issue. Now it's going to turn into a productivity issue, because now you're going to be overworking the team members that you have, because you can't retain anyone because your organization isn't hitting those points. So if you really want to be an organization, a company that's going to be long lasting, you have to consider, what does the future look like? And what strategies and what kind of things do I want to change institutionally in order for me to be long lasting? And yes, it's uncomfortable. It's something that a lot of people, it's like a big change for them, right? But again, if you truly want to be here long term, you have to consider, what is tomorrow looking like? And yes, we're not telling you need to shift your values, your morals, or anything like that, but really consider that the future and the people that are going to be the future leaders in your organization are going to want to work for that diverse organization, that inclusive organization, that organization that provides equity, versus your organization that does not want to move forward in that area.
That's so true. And so then there's for you, and Kara, you can answer this, particularly in the field that you are, but what you're saying in essence, Aisha, is that there is a direct link between inclusion and equity and innovation.
Yeah, 100%. And research shows it. That more diverse spaces that have more women, again, just diverse, backgrounds and cultures, you're becoming more innovative, which means, of course, we have some people like, is it about the money? Yes, it's about the dollar bill. You're increasing revenue, you're increasing reach, right? Say your organization wants to reach African Americans, but you don't have anybody that speaks the language. We've seen that in a lot of clothing lines. That's like, why would you come out with that kind of shirt? Why would you come out with that type of, verbiage or language? Who was in the room? Did they look at this before they put that out there? But
did you hear a story about how Beyonce left a particular company's meeting because when she got there, there was only white males?
No, I didn't.
And so she took her business to another brand because that brand didn't reflect the diversity that she thought was important, particularly to work with her.
And that's important. That's important, that's important. That gives an example of, you have someone that, is of, a big influence that's able to say, listen, I want to be in more diverse spaces. And again, that's what the future of tomorrow is going to do. They're going to go into those companies and that spaces that are going to look like society looks. And that is a great message. And, for someone, like I said, of great influence, to be able to say, no, this is the expectation. She's literally preparing a lot of these organizations and companies of what the future is going to look like. Either you're going to retain individuals or you're going to lose individuals. And then you'll just be the company of the now, but not the company of the future.
Oh, that is so good. Go ahead, jump in, Kara. So there is a direct link between diversity, inclusion, and equity and innovation. What do you have to say about that?
So
the direction, guys.
I mean, I have so many things coming to my mind. So I do work for the Upper Room, and our little devotional magazine is 80 years old. It's over 80 years old. And the assumption is that our main audience, the folks buying this magazine, are older, white, conservatively, theologically folks, right? Mm-hmm. But if we continue to serve that audience, the magazine's going to die, because conservative, theologically older white folks are dying. So if we want this magazine, I believe in this magazine. It has value. It has international authors. It does have a broader reach, but we have to innovate. We have to look at the size of it. Like, it was made to put in a man's suit pocket and a woman's pocketbook. That's what it was created for, right?
Right. Wow.
That's what it was.
We can't grow past here.
Right. So, you see, the bags we carry now as women, like, these are, these big hobo bags. Like, so the covers, the art, the size, the paper, like, all of it, like you're saying, Aisha, we can innovate for a new audience and for a younger audience, or for a more theologically diverse audience. Or we can serve the now until that's over.
So what about people who are out there, and now I'm just playing devil's advocate, right? So what about people are out there who are saying, well, we're doing well. This has worked for us for so long. Why change? Why affirmative action? Why gender equality? I mean, it's been working for us for so long. What do you say to people who have that particular perspective without
my question?
Try Jesus.
No. No, I mean, my question is it really working?
Right.
So one of the people that I love how innovative they've become is the Salesforce CEO, Mark Benioff. On the outside, they were getting best places to work. They were being highlighted all over the place. And then one of his female executives came to him and said, there is a gender, like, it's not equal pay. And he's like, what? Like, initially, he's like, what are you talking about? We're best places to work. Everybody's reaching out to me so I can speak at their events. What do you mean that we aren't like thebomb.com? And she had to show it to him. So the reality is it really working? Like, from the outside, it might look good, but from the inside, it's just like health, right? Have you seen somebody that's like slim and fit and you're like, ooh, they look good. And they come to find out they end up having some disease and something else going on in the inside. So that's the question. Does it look good on the outside? But what's going on in the inside? And I think a lot of CEOs, companies, they forget to look in the inside. They're so focused on the outside. They so focused on what looks good externally, but internally things are breaking down. So the question is it really working? Does it really look good? Or is there a disease festering inside? At any moment now, everything's going to shut down.
And this is a perfect setup for what we're going to do now. Kara, I know that you're like ready to jump in, but if you can set up the video and then jump in, I kind of feel like that would be really good chemistry. I don't know what to call it.
All right. Well, okay. But let me just say one thing.
She's bursting.
Well, I think one of the things like that I'm learning or coming to looking for, this is what's going to set up the video. One of the things that I'm starting to look for is how many Black, Indigenous people of color are working exponentially harder than white folks to make it look like it's running well. So
yes, Kara, you get it.
So
you guys stop what you're doing. Like, share, comment right now. Kara is dropping all kinds of nuggets and realness. Educate and activate. Good word. That's what Marilyn said. Clyde said, great conversation. Yes, Kara, go ahead. Yes.
So I think that's what this video is going to show. If you don't know what to look for, you don't see it. So.
Ooh, we have to pick up. You just. I don't even.
That was a good word.
That was.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
That killed me. I didn't see the bear the first time.
You know, and I told them earlier when we watched it, this is my second time seeing it, and I missed the bear again. But this third time, now that I was aware, I paid attention to it. But it shows an example of when you become aware of something, now you see the bear. But also how over time, you can also like fall into the midst of like, you don't see it anymore, right? You have to constantly be aware.
That's right.
So,
yeah.
And Kara, I love what you said, because I have had experiences in the past, particularly as an African-American woman, under 40, of working extremely hard, going above and beyond, and not being compensated for it. So how do we, one, advocate for ourselves? And two, how do we, on a policy level, on an institutional level, make changes or at least advocate for changes in that regard?
Well, can I say, Nathalie, this reminds me of a conversation that we had at a meeting together. And you were saying, like, I feel like I'm saying over and over again how hard I'm working and what I need to be a success, but I'm not being heard. And I think what I said to you was, if you keep showing up polished and looking perfect and telling everybody that you're succeeding every day, nobody's gonna hear it, right?
I love it though, Kara.
I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. I want to look good and polished every day. But I think it's this balance, right? If balls never fall and you wear yourself out to make sure the balls never fall, then the support, the policy changes, it's never seen. It's never seen. But that's a hard line to walk for women, for everybody,
especially for Black women, because there's the saying, if you want something done, get a Black woman to do it, and it will get done, right? And so there's and I don't want to say innate, because our cultures, our race, our backgrounds, no one's monolithic, but there is a particular cultural trend among African-American women. And I mean, it shows up in being the most educated in the room. It shows up in being the largest and fastest growing entrepreneurial population. It shows up in multiple places. And so how do you, whether it's a predominantly white space, whether it's corporate, whether it's wherever, Aisha, how do you, as Kara said, not be inauthentic to who you are, but hold the system accountable in a sense to teach them how to treat you?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because there's studies out there that show that even when we were talking about recruiting, right, and job opportunities and so on, there's a research out there that says that white men would apply for a job even if they don't qualify it. Right. So say you have 8 things that they're supposed to qualify for. They might have 2, but they're more willing to apply for that job, even if they just meet 2. But as a African-American woman, a lot of people that are in that minority population, you feel like you have to meet 8 and some, right, for you to even be qualified. And again, it goes back to really, again, we're supposed to be talking about kind of like, or I think we're supposed to be talking about the institution. It's really about making change within and really being that organization that's willing to say, listen, I want to look at everything, and we might have to dismantle or make some shifts and changes from how we recruit, how we even refer and get candidates in, right? Because maybe typically a white male might only refer another white male. So we even have to look at that. You have to really look at the roots and actually really identify, utilize your systems to find out how diverse are we from the top, from the bottom to the top. How inclusive are we? Why is there a break in the system right here? And really get into the weeds and really start to dismantle and make changes while also holding those people accountable that are in those leadership roles. But again, it starts with the top. It starts with the executives. It has to be literally a cultural shift within the company in order for these changes to happen. And who needs to go needs to go, because again, are you trying to be the company of the now or of the future? And if you're trying to be long lasting, you really have to say, what kind of things do we have to change and shift? Listen, didn't we just have to make a dramatic shift because of COVID? We had to. People did it, right? People had to go virtual.
It took me a few months. I'm there now.
But they did it, right? That quick. That quick, they changed policy that quick. See, my organization typically like for members to re-enlist, take their oath of office and say, listen, I decide that I'm going to enlist another 6 years into the, United States Air Force or whatever military branch. Typically, you have to be in a room with an officer in front of the flag, hands up. They changed that instantly. Oh, we can do it virtually. We don't have to be physically there. So you can change certain policies that quick. An executive order can change things that quick. TikTok can go away in 45 days if an American company will not pick it up that quick. But we can take time to go into our companies and really look at the weeds and the things that we have to change. But we'll make so we can see with COVID how quick we're able to make adjustments even in the school system. But for some reason, you find it so hard to really look into the weeds of the company and make the changes within. That should make you question the why. So it can happen. You just have to want to do it.
That's really good. So how far can we take this, Kara? Can we say that everyone in our organization is going to take anti-racist training? Can we, how far should an organization, whether it's upper management, middle management, or institutional wide, how far, particularly in this context, and Aisha, I want you to answer it next, do you believe we should push organizations to go? And how do we do that in a strategic way?
Yeah. I wish I had an answer for you, Nathalie. But that's what I'm wrestling with right now. Like I have, I manage a unit of 25 to 30 people. So can I require that of the folks that are on my staff? Can I bring in an outside person? Can I bring in a Black person as a consultant and pay them equitably to train our staff and to raise our awareness? To see the things that we don't know to look for. Can I do that? And then, but what's the downfall if I do that in my area, but the rest of the organization isn't doing it? And then what's the downfall of waiting until I convince the rest of the organization to do it? When I can see what needs to happen right now, but do I take the time to bring the whole organization along? So, that is really like what I'm living with day to day right now. As we're getting comments on our blog, we're posting blogs about racial equity. Nathalie has been on our blog about racial equity, and we're getting everything from ignorant to hateful to supportive comments. And so like you're saying, Aisha, like overnight, what is our policy for commenting? Do we engage? Do we ignore? Do we educate? How do we handle all of that? And what, I'm talking too much, but can those of us who know what to look for and see it are trying to activate, can we act on behalf of an organization that we haven't done the internal work of the organization yet? So what I'm saying is a leader may not represent the work that I have called the internal staff to do. So there's a dissonance there. Like I don't want to misrepresent that we're some, woke and educated and racially equitable organization if we're not. But that shouldn't stop me from doing the things that I know to be right. So
and I think that's
to mess up and be called on it,
intention, right? Because sometimes for those of us who are in predominantly Black spaces or predominantly racially diverse spaces, the expectation is those spaces are, equitable and inclusive and diverse. And in many ways they are not. And I think that's the insidious nature of white supremacy and white supremacist ideals and power structures of traditional leadership, in that Black people can show up in white supremacist face too. And that insidious nature really that you're highlighting, Kara, is something that we all have to pay attention to, because it shows up in thank you, Marilyn, in predominantly male spaces. It shows up in even church spaces where gender equality is pervasive at times. It shows up in other racially diverse people looking down on those who are immigrants or othered. And so how do we identify those things, be aware of those things, but yes, not only hold the institution accountable, but hold ourselves accountable to what we're experiencing too. You had something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I mean, we talked about that last time. It does start with us. It starts with us and being that person that is taking time to really pay attention to the bear, identifying the bear, really making sure within us, what are our unconscious biases? I mean, we have to constantly pay attention to those. And I know that has to be a hard situation to be in, Kara, because you're like, okay, what do I do? And that's the reality, unfortunately, when you work for an organization or a company. It's kind of like whatever, you have people at the top making the decisions and you're limited. So I definitely would urge anyone in that situation, do the work within your organization or with your small team, if that's all you can do for that time being. But also recognize, okay, when is it time to make a shift? When is it a time to make a change? Or in regards to, that's why, again, the individuals coming into organizations of the future, they're willing to lead. They're willing to make the change and say, you know what, this isn't the organization for me. But do what you can in the space that you're in. For my team, I know that for my team, I'm doing what I can with my team, right? I'm advocating for my team. And then when I do have the opportunity to tell my leaders and they're like, listen, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about, diversity and inclusion. I sent the email, I made the request and they applied it. Some people won't apply it. So I think in those spaces, do what you can where you're at. Don't feel like, my organization isn't going to take action, so I'm just going to shut down. No, take action. But again, it always is going to start with us and us taking time to really identify the biases we have within ourselves. Because again, it might be something even within like inner cultures. I'm an African, right? I'm an immigrant. I've dealt with things like coming here and felt like I had to be more American to fit in. I'm in the military. I've been in spaces that are predominantly white and they're male. And I'm like, I felt like I had to put this toughness, to fit in. So in so many different spaces, we have to really consistently check and identify the bear and then do what we can in the spaces that we're in to affect change, even if we do have that wall at the top. And then also identify when it's time to transition and shift, where your ideals and where your values are going to be respected and honored. Some people are afraid to make that shift, but sometimes there are better things that are going to be on the other side of that, of that organization. And yes, just take time to really assess that, but just do what you can in the space that you're in.
I think that's so important. And I think, Kara, going back to what you said earlier about hiring someone outside of the institution to facilitate that, I totally 100% agree with you that transformation starts with us and that there are both strategies for innovative leadership, Aisha. But I also think that an institution is inherently designed to take care of the institution. And so as much influence as you can have within your team, within your organization, within however it is that you're making an impact, that if an institution is, again, wants to be sustainable, wants to be innovative, wants to go forward, not just for now, but in the future, then there must be an investment, right? There can be no ROI. And what is the ROI? A more just, a more inclusive, a more diverse, and a more equitable space. But if you don't invest in having someone to walk alongside of your institution, hold your institution accountable, then you're never going to get to that place. And I think the other thing about having an outside person, and this is my resource that I'm recommended, another way by, I can say friends, which is really cool to have friends that have authored a book. Stephen Lewis, Matthew Williams, and Dory Baker, shout out to them. This is one quote I wanted to share. Cultivating an imagination of the world as an inescapable web of mutuality, especially through the lens of Shriner's story, widely expands our understanding of call, of purpose, of removing limitations we've been considering to reveal a rich and nourishing landscape. if you don't start to imagine a different way, and that's what I think a consultant does. That's what I think an outside co-creator does. It helps the organization to imagine a different way of being and doing, and understanding that this is not just people who are working for me. This is not just a woman or a Black person, but there's mutuality here in our stories. And then I want to bring this up. You had shared this with us, Kara. Can you talk a little bit about Race Forward and some of the resources?
Yeah, so I was first introduced by Race Forward probably about 18 months ago. They did a racial equity training in Nashville at Vanderbilt Divinity School. And this is the image that they used to illustrate implicit bias. So it was after Hurricane Katrina. And these are, reputable news organizations. But you see the person of color on the left hand of the screen. A young man walks through chest-deep floodwater after looting a grocery store in New Orleans on Tuesday. But then you see two white folks on the right also carrying bags and moving through the water. And it's two residents wade through chest-deep water after finding bread and soda from a local grocery store. So this...
Try Jesus.
Jesus.
Don't try me. Oh.
But this is what, if you don't see the bear, you receive the news and you assume that to be true. And I think one of the things about implicit bias is that it's not malicious. There are, as a definition, there are folks folks in our federal administration who are malicious and who are trying to spread that. But their implicit bias is not necessarily malicious. It's unseen. And so when you write the news and receive the news, it just continues to inform the prejudice or bias that you already have. Yeah.
So we're going to wrap up because Kara's moving up to her deluxe apartment in the sky, and I have date night, and Aisha's gonna get 16 more awards by the time we come back. Aisha's out changing the world, honey. She's going into these corporations and she is consulting and she is improving their performance. She is giving them all the business. So shout out to you, Aisha and Kara, for the way that you lovely ladies are leading. So this is the last nugget of the night. So seeing the bear, right? That has kind of been a thing that has come up for us a couple of times. Can you give us your, 1 to 3 practical ways that I can see the bear in my current context, where I'm leading, where I'm working, or even just in my daily life? How can I practically, step by step, see the bear so that I can live a life that is more apt towards diversity, inclusion, and equity?
Well, I think one of the first things, again, like I mentioned before, we have to start with this: identify your unconscious biases, right? It starts from even what you're watching on TV. You might really have to say, you know what, for the next week, I am going to write down how many biased information that I'm watching or seeing on the media. I'm going to just jot it down and then reflect the following week and say, man, I didn't realize the news station. I didn't realize what I was reading. I didn't realize the conversations I was having with my friends. This was the kind of response I had. So it could be literally you testing it out and really saying, this week, I'm going to really pay attention to the bear. I'm really going to pay attention at the emotions and the feelings I get when I see this person or when we have these type of conversations. So it always starts with you. If you're a CEO of a company, of an organization, I always talk about this thing I call host your own roast. Really take time and get with your first tier, your mid-tier leaders, and really sit down with them and ask them, what is the pulse of the organization? Really get into the weeds of what is going on in your spaces. I know you're at the top, right? Again, not to take too long, but everybody has been hearing, or some people have heard about what's going on with Ellen, right? Ellen was this amazing place to work. Everybody's like, when you think about Ellen, you think about that intro, she's coming out dancing. But what happened is that the happiest place to work, the fun and the great space turned into something that no one expected it to turn to. So what happens a lot of times is as when we reach the top, or once time goes by, we're not taking time and we're not touching that first tier, that mid tier. And it's really time for you as a CEO, as an executive at the C-suite level, for you to go back down and really take the pulse and figure out what's going on with your team members. How do they feel? Have those uncomfortable conversations. Then once you do that, develop a team. Don't just expect the ERGs, those employee resources groups, to be the only one that's going to be able to identify the issues, but really come up with a real good team to really get to the weeds of your recruiting efforts, your referral efforts. Let them look at the job descriptions, find out if they have biases, really identify why there's a breakdown between the mid-tier and that executive level, and really start creating processes. So like what Natalie said, hold people accountable, make sure that you're changing and restructuring your policies and your procedures, and really making sure that over time you're doing balance and checks, even if it's every 6 months, to make sure that you are being a more equitable and inclusive space. So it really starts with you, then making sure you connect with your team members, identifying the root issues, cutting off the root, maybe restructuring it, and then also the maintenance part. Because just because change happens today, you need to also make sure it maintains that same type of process, so you don't find yourself in a space like, unfortunately, Ellen is going through, where it went from this and now it's shut down. So really make sure that you're paying attention to those practices.
Wow, that was really good. Kara, do you remember the question?
I do.
Help us, give us your nugget.
Well, I think for white folks who might be watching, I think there has to be some type, I will speak for me. I had to experience some type of awakening to see my own racism, to see my own implicit bias. And then I have to keep being honest about that every day, every interaction, whatever I'm reading, whoever I'm in relationship. I have to be honest about that. I'm gonna share one of the places where I started seeing the bear was the Me and White Supremacy workbook by Layla F. Saad, which is getting a lot of publicity, as it should right now. But it's a workbook where she says, you need to read through this, you need to do the work, you need to tell the truth and to not generalize. Don't say, oh, I'm racist. Say, when I first met Nathalie, I assumed that because she was young and Black, she wasn't qualified for her position. I'm not saying that's what I thought, but like, we have to be, as white folks, we have to tell the truth about what's in our head and in our heart. And we have to be very specific about that. And that's the only way that we're going to begin to see the bear, to name it, and to begin to change the racism that lives in us, to begin to unlearn it, and then to activate differently in the world. And so Layla challenged me to look at white privilege, tone policing, Black joy, white silence. Like, there's 28 things, 28 bears that she made me look at and journal and be really, really honest about how those things live in me and how I enact that as a leader, as a parent, as a spouse, as a friend, as an activist and an ally. They are all living in me, and I have to be true. I have to look at that truly, and have good friends who are willing to call me on it too. When I I've watched the video 3 times and I start missing the bear again. So, yeah.
I didn't see the bear at all. I'm fairly woke. I believe I am. All right, my last nugget. I think I would say, on a micro level, create flat leadership. Like, just change the power dynamics altogether to empower everyone to lead in their own way. And then second, how do we lead in our own way, right? There are these tools out there. Aisha's helped me with this, particularly around the DISC assessment and leadership surveys. for those individual leaders to become self-aware so that they can improve their communication, right? And that's a little bit about what you're saying, Kara, is being honest about who you are and being willing to share those stories. And I think flat leadership first, right? Taking away those authoritative kind of structures in your team will allow us to be more vulnerable, to be more honest, to communicate more clearly and effectively so that we can move to the third thing. And what is third thing? The third thing, transformation and innovation. There's something innovative that happens when I am allowed to be 100% who I am. And when I allow you to be 100% of who you are. And again, going back to what we discussed about how that shows up. How does innovation shows up? It only shows up positively. It shows up in increased funding. And shout out to my team. I want to say this. We had a major win this week. I'm not going to put out all of what we did. You will hear about it soon. But we raised a significant amount of money in 7 days. And I could not do it if I did not have this amazing, diverse team that is flat leadership. That is all of the things that I'm saying, that no one is better than the other. And though I have the title program coordinator among us, I call myself the co-creator because I understand that that is the type of leadership that gets things done, that every voice matters, that every person is inherently valuable, that all that my team has to bring to the table enables us to do work that is transformational. And so no matter who you are, I want you to know that those are the few nuggets that can help you. 1, flat leadership. 2, create that environment so that people can be self-aware, to authentically bring who they are in the table so communication can be more clear. And 3, those are the steps that leads ultimately to innovation, transformation, and of course, productivity and sustainability. Listen, that's it. That's all. We love you.